good dividing line. The morons are definitely more in-person collective experience, and the lessons are definitely.
I'm more pool house.
Sam is more pool house in-person experiences.
Sam likes the one-on-one.
I love one-on-one. I can deal with 2-on-1. More than that, too many people.
Hey guys, how was Labor Day out east?
Well, what did you just say, Dave?
I had forgotten how ridiculous the Hamptons are.
Define ridiculous for everybody.
Yes, define ridiculous.
Oh, I don't even know. All I know is that if I hang out there any longer, I'm going to have to replace my entire wardrobe like Sam did.
That's true. Sam's wearing his Martha's Vineyard shirt. Woohoo!
Dave was the only one wearing jeans at like a 50-person party.
What else would you wear?
Oh, khakis, obviously. Come on, you guys are East Coast people.
Come on, Sam. Khakis, boat shoes.
Yeah.
They're just so uncomfortable.
It's true.
Boat shoes are great.
Depends on what kind, I suppose.
I wear Olokai boat shoes these days.
We're 2 seconds in and you got a product endorsement.
I'm full of those.
Yeah, you're full of
those. By Olokai. You can wear them. You can run in them. You can wear them on a boat.
Yeah, and then you get plantar fasciitis like you have. So don't run.
You wear them to a formal gathering, and then after a year or so, you get plantar fasciitis and end up wearing hookahs all day.
And the other big Labor Day news is that my CU Buffs won their opening game against TCU. Thanks.
In what sport?
Thanks to Deion Sanders.
Oh my gosh.
Football, Sam. It's only the biggest story in sports right now.
The biggest story in sports. We're going to get to sports today. We have sports. We've got media. We've got, of course, some Taylor Swift. We've got. Now as this podcast progressed, there are some segments, and we've got Sam's TV corner, Britt's Taylor corner, Dave's football corner, and I don't want to know what you guys think of me, but let's take this moment to welcome our listeners. Thanks for tuning into another week of More or Less, where we talk about tech, venture capital, media, and all the things that people are talking about. It's like there is just so much news happening, guys. I'm exhausted. I don't know. I wrote 2 stories in the last 4 days. Like, what's going on?
What's your usual pace per story? What's the normal?
Well, I don't. I lead this. I just, I sit in the back and sit there with my editor's pen. But I don't know. We're publishing like 4 or 5 things a day now, so we're cranking. But
is it just that people are back to work?
You're the only news organization in the world where 4 or 5 things is like a huge number of stories. You're supposed to publish like thousands of small things written by AI.
I mean, at Brit & Co., we were doing like 50 to 100 a day at the max.
Oh, okay, but let's talk about what these are. Months-long investigation to Amazon flex drivers getting shot on the job because people are realizing they're delivering packages late at night. These are obviously tragedies. But this is, a real challenge that really speaks to this moment. So that was one of our pieces.
Well, delivery robots are going to kill that murderous industry.
Kill that murderous industry. Choice of words there. But no, this week I published, I'm actually curious what these VCs think. But you guys, have you heard of Deal? Anyone heard of Deal?
I've heard of Deal. I know Deal.
Have we heard of Deal?
Wait, Sam, have you heard of Deal? Dave forgot about Deal, but Sam remembers Deal. Sam
remembers Deal.
So, you want to talk about Deal?
Not particularly, to be honest.
Okay. Let me talk about Deal for a second. So Deal is a company. It's one of these like pandemic made their business. So Deal makes it easy to hire remote contractors. And if you want to hire teams in other countries outside the US, which many people want to do, many more people wanted to do during COVID in remote work, Deal has an all-in-one HR way to do that. Huge growth, hundreds of millions in ARR. Interesting business. Huge, Andreessen Horowitz, Coatue, Spark, Emerson Collective, all big investors. So it turns out that Deal also has another product, which is basically a payout product. It's a way to pay people out. And we found it was being used by about 24 prop trading firms. So these are kind of unregulated businesses where you pay a subscription fee to compete in some virtual challenges. If you do that, you get a chance to have your trades mirrored by real money and then to take a cut in the profits. Very confusing.
Yeah, I'm so confused what this has anything to do with their mainline business.
Well, what they say is that these sites are using, if you run HR, you have to pay people. You build payout technology to pay people. And then by extension, other companies could just use that payout piece or do use that payout piece. But the interesting thing about this is like these sites are unregulated, very confusing. Other payment services do not support them. And we, upon looking into this, reached out to the CFTC and we said, what is the deal with these sites? Like, do they fall under US financial regulation? And we listed, I think, 2 examples. And 4 days later, they shut one of the sites down and then sued it for being a Ponzi scheme. So It turns out that they weren't offering a cut of the profits. They were just kind of issuing payouts based on these subscription fees and actually had incentives to make the trades unprofitable so that you would fall below some balance you had to keep and then re-up your subscription fee. So anyway, I worked a lot on this story this week, so thank you guys for hearing it out. But it's kind of like, and we're seeing it play out. I mean, as I'm recording this, we're publishing updates about other firms looking into supporting these. And I think it's a really interesting case. Deal says, look, they comply with our business. Now, not this one shut down. They said, we missed that one, right? Or, we didn't know, and then we shut it down. But it's really interesting, these cases of you're in one business. These companies have a lot of different products. This isn't advertised, right, is the business that they're in. And, I think there is a question of how much money they were making. They say it's very, 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 very little, sub 1% of revenue. But we also talked to the operators of these sites who were paying Deal $49 per month per active user on the platform and taking a cut of the payouts on the platform. And if you do that math, you get kind of a different picture. So yeah, have you guys ever had a bait and switch for a company? Not that this is not a bait and switch, to be clear, but it is a different product.
So I guess I'm just kind of sad because I pride myself on researching and knowing all the dark corners of the internet where weird shit happens and knowing the models. So you're like, oh yeah, of course there are these crazy yahoos who for some reason are trading Forex overseas in a semi-regulated way. And shocker, it's a huge business that no one knows about. That's my jam, is knowing that stuff. And so the fact that I didn't know this was happening and this was a whole sub-weird industry, that's the sad part for me, is
where do you usually find those things, Sam? Well,
this
yeah,
is
how do you find out about
Sam's
those?
porn corner.
Yeah, well, it's just you have to know the real incentives of the world, right? And what's really going on. And this is we all know, it's kind of I feel like it's not knowing about BitTorrent is not knowing about this stuff, which is an enormous industry of people doing somewhat what sounds like extremely legally questionable things where they've structured some sort of subscription product around a market to pretend they're not doing illegal trading when they're clearly doing illegal trading, right? Again, I just find this stuff culturally fascinating, and I was sad to know that there's this whole corner of the internet I didn't even know existed. So now I have to go spend time finding the other versions.
You got to read the CFTC's lawsuit about what this company was doing. Again, this isn't Deal. This is the company that was using them as the payout provider, My Forex Funds.
Oh my God.
Anything named My blank.
I'm still so confused as to what we're talking about.
The
this is
domain
just
name
hilarious.
is a total giveaway, by the way.
Sounds on the internet. I guess here's a legitimate question. Thank you, Dave, for bringing us back to. But what responsibility do you think startups have to kind of like know their customers, right? And I guess you can answer that sort of like ethically, you can answer it like legally, but we're in this area of like growth at all costs, right? People are scrambling for growth. A lot of these, picks and shovels kinds of providers are being used by all sorts of businesses globally. Like as investors, how do you think about that? And
let me give a serious answer, which is like there's another big thing that's been going on recently that has some similar, I wouldn't say similar overtones, but you have this kind of double-edged sword, which is a lot of these like software phone-based systems built on Twilio that were being used for like robo spam. Right. So there's like, and like there are legitimate uses for these things. Like they're very legitimate businesses, right? They like help small businesses manage communication and flow and da 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 da. But obviously, like if you hadn't noticed, robo spam's kind of a problem, right? And like there's been a bunch of crackdowns happening up and down the boards at the legal level, at the carrier level, et cetera. People saying like, how do we stop SMS spam, right? And so from an investor perspective, I think, look, you want your companies to be doing things that are good businesses and profitable. Sounds like Deal has a very profitable small corner of the weird ass internet they found here to make money on. But the key thing is like you're supposed to be building enterprise value. So if it turns out that like all the shit you're doing is gonna get shut down, right, or is questionable, the problem is you've just built no enterprise value. You might have some short-term cash flow, but it's gonna go away. So like as an investor, it's just not that valuable, right? So I think, like with the SMS story, like everyone's been working super hard who touches that industry to like make sure that they're kicking off everyone who's not complying and who is doing robo spam because it's clearly not going to last, and it isn't. I mean, as of September 1, a bunch of stuff got shut down, right? And so like there's a really high quality incentive to have high quality revenue, right? Whereas, if you look at other industries or places that are less, there are lots of money land grabs where people do questionable shit, but it's really hard to see how that's enterprise value, right? And so if you're basically saying, oh, we have a super high quality business model that's super sticky, hooray, hooray, but then actually all your cash is coming from super shitty stuff that's going to get shut down, and like, my illegal overseas trading operation.com, like it's just a problem as an investor because you're like, I'm looking at your financial statements, it says you're doing really well, but like, wait a minute, is our revenue coming from the place we need it to create long-term enterprise value or not?
I mean, Britt, I feel like we got to talk about the media business here. Like, I mean, what was your experience with Brit, or is your experience with Brit & Co. in that regard?
Well, I mean, the problem with the media business, unless you're a subscription business, like the information, is that you don't really know your customers. I mean, they're cookies at the end of the day. And unless you have an account system and login, and Brit & Co. does and has for many years, where you can buy things or, favorite things or whatever you're using. First of all, a very small percentage of your audience will use that. Second of all, you're still not getting that much information about them. And so like we have many, many, many millions of people that come to that site and use those properties every month. And I can tell you if they're maybe male or female, certain age demographics and where they're geographically based. And that's about it. and it sucks. And so even with email lists, a lot of people in media are like, well, but we have email, and like, it's great. You can reach out to people and maybe get their attention a little bit stronger than traditional internet, but you're getting open rates. You have an email address that could be anybody in the world. And so
we have IP addresses, but like, look, I will say in interesting things I learned on the internet in the last 24 hours, I was like, I wanted to read this. There's a Wired article about, I don't even, it goes to how high impact it was. I don't even remember what it was about. It wasn't the OpenAI one. It was a different thing they wrote. And I was like, and I hit a paywall, and it was $5 to subscribe.
A year.
$5 a year. And then shocker, after a year of fine print, they upgrade you to $30 a year. And I'm like, how on earth? Like, the idea of having 1 million subscribers and making $5 million a year before you pay credit card fees, like, blew my mind that this is possibly a business. And so I was shooting my mouth off online about how ridiculous this is. And it is. It's not a subscription business, but a few smart people went out, I was like, no, they don't even care about that. They're just doing it because you get paid more by advertisers if you have card on file for someone, because then, to your point, Bray, it shows they're real. That kind of makes sense. It still means they're not running a subscription business, and I don't get it. But like, But at least that's your point about demystifying who your customers are.
Having sat on the board of Dwell for many years, that this is true. And the analogy was always that people want to advertise in magazines that cost money, not the free ones. If you sort of look at the magazine rack in the airport, like the free newspapers are always lower quality than the ones that people pay for. And advertisers still look at it this way.
Remember the free newspaper bins people used to have around town?
Yeah, I mean, it's Hudson News. You just go in and take whatever you want, right?
That's how it works. But no, I get what you're saying, Dave. Like the pamphlets, like the local. Yeah, got it. Okay.
Jeff, it does beg a question, which is why does the information make more money on advertising?
That was a great. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Oh man, I've got lots of stories there. Well, but I mean, yeah. I mean, the only other thing to say is that with programmatic advertising, so like think banner ads that run on a website organically, if you have any information about your customers, you're going to get higher RPMs or like rate per thousand, so higher, deals from those advertisers, even with programmatic ads, just with like even a small set of data. So user data is a big thing that a bunch of people in the media industry are trying to crack, and it's still a big, tough game. But advertising and programmatic media are not the future.
15 years behind. The user data story is so old that social networks are having to go in the other direction because it's been cracked down on. And media come to like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should have some data. It's like, yeah,
well, if social networks didn't implode the media industry's actual business model, then like this would be a lot easier conversation.
You can't defend the level of brain power across the entire media industry, Brett, unfortunately. I think there are pockets of excellence, but lots of room for improvement, I would say. But
for sure.
We're good. No, Dave, fire
I've got
away.
another version of this topic, which is a mutual friend of all of ours called me, an investor, and asked me to talk to some founders that were launching a new social network or a new social product that I think we've all tried. And they were pre-launch, and I got on the phone with the founders, and I asked them one question, which was, well, we talked about a lot of things, but I asked them one key question, which was, how many countries in the world are you launching in to start with? And it wasn't a question they'd actually thought about. Like they said, we hadn't thought of that. Why are you asking us that? And I said, well, if my experience of the last couple of years and all the way back to Path is any guide, you do not want to have a country, become your largest user where you cannot monetize the users, because you're just basically burning server costs into a non-monetizable market, and this can happen very quickly. And they hadn't actually considered it, and they called me the next day and they said, our conversation really changed our opinion, and we decided to launch in half the countries in the world and none of the ones that we talked about. And so I think to Sam's point, there's revenue, which is bad revenue and doesn't accrete to enterprise value, but there's also DAU, MAU that doesn't accrue enterprise value at the same rate. And that's also a really important consideration if you're building a social networking or, whether it's a subscription or ad-driven product, like all countries are not created equal and can really damage your business enterprise value.
So then, Dave, I'm actually curious how you think about Europe in that context. Because if you think in social networking, because historically Europe's super rich, they buy shit, like da-da-da. But given all of the bullshit regulations they've created and the fact that it's basically impossible to monetize outside of subscription, do you think like Europe, I mean, I always used to think that the real solution to Europe was just to take away all their nice things. So like if you want to have ridiculous rules, then like you just can't have nice things.
Wait,
and like
nice things being like Instagram, like what's a
exactly, like good apps. It's
nice apps. Yeah,
you can't have nice apps.
It's also a Taylor Swift title of a song. Just want to throw that out there from Taylor's Corner.
Is it about Europe,
back to you.
And what
it's called "This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things." But yeah, we should redo it. Okay, go ahead. Back to you, Sam.
So just to push on this, it's like I always was like, like Germany, you want to have some stupid fucking laws, then you just can't have this app.
No nice apps for you.
No, that's not. And I get why that's obviously very difficult for existing businesses. But Dave, I actually just wonder. I mean, in theory, Europe's rich and they can still, in theory, buy subscriptions. I'm not sure how proven that is for social products. Do you think that like the next generation of social apps is just kind of like, fuck Germany, right?
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up. I just started thinking about this in the last 2 weeks because I've just been thinking a lot about social apps, the next phase. and strategies for how to grow them. And it wasn't actually part of my mental framework for how to think about the world until the last few weeks. And I think I'm with you. I actually think I would deprioritize Europe broadly right now. And I would sort of focus on an America first out strategy and probably focus on, I don't know, the BRIC countries. Well, it's actually hard to think about the risk map right now in terms of which countries to go first. I mean, you definitely don't want to do the ones that are low monetization, high usage. Like that's the main thing you really don't want to get into. But Europe, yeah. And it's funny, Sam, I saw you tweeting about the wired subscription thing. And I actually was building a bunch of subscription models, Excel for modeling out what subscription businesses might look like for consumer apps in the last couple of weeks. And it is so hard to think about how, Spotify has something like 250 million subscribers. Netflix is about the same size. Like these just like, it's pretty hard to get to big scale with subscriptions.
It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating topic, and I want to lead this into a conversation about like what is happening with apps and consumer and business model, because it does kind of feel like there's some new stuff going on. And Dave, I know you're at the center of this, but like obviously what ties these together is, you've got Facebook considering offering an ad-free subscription version in Europe for Instagram and Facebook because of the Digital Markets Act, which is going to affect soon. And we were talking about this in our editors meeting yesterday. And then someone brought up like, how's Twitter Blue doing? Right. Which is sort of horribly. And the information's reported like Netflix's numbers on its sort of ad and subscription tier are also, not huge. And so it seems like something is happening with the shift there with subscription coming into play into the sector more, but it also seems like there aren't clear rocket ship examples of it working with this next generation. So Dave, what are you seeing?
Well, I would actually like to define for listeners what the Digital Market Act is. Sure. Who of us has the best understanding of it? Because I actually don't know bullet point per bullet point, like what it means for Europe.
Yeah, so it's the latest quite sweeping set of regulations coming down in Europe. I think it technically goes into effect early next year, but there are like phases in the sort of rulemaking. And it's basically an attempt to crack down on the big platforms and promote more competition.
But what do they brass tacks have to do? I mean, why is it basically like you can't run an advertising business and you must run a subscription business?
There's a lot of different parts of it, but it's basically around identifying these gatekeepers, of which Meta
which somehow iMessage is not one.
Yes.
Which is kind of strange, because iCloud, by the way, is one of the largest subscription services in the world, has 1 billion subscribers.
Right. Well, that we can talk. So Apple is actively arguing that they shouldn't be under this. But basically, it's saying if you meet these gatekeeper criterias, you're subject to a lot of rules, many of which have to do with like interoperability. So what Apple doesn't want to happen is for your iMessage bubbles to appear differently than your text message bubbles, right?
Yeah. It's $1 trillion color. They don't want to give up their $1 trillion color, green versus blue.
Yes. But we have all sorts of friends who think their like dating lives have been impacted by like.
Well, I will admit that even I don't like messaging people on Android because it's slow. It doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's loosely what we're talking about.
Yeah. But also think implications for App Store, implications for data privacy, why Threads didn't launch in Europe, because seeding Threads with the Instagram graph could have run afoul of it. But it's basically saying, these big tech gatekeepers, so to speak, they obviously picked a nice name. Everyone wants to be gatekeeper, have a different set of rules around anti-competitive practices. Now you can, maybe this is a subject for a different day. I remember first asking people about some of the proposed rule changes, like interoperable app stores. And they were like, look, these companies are so big now, this is going to have no effect. This is just an example of, the regulation comes too late and the big guys have found a way around it and it adds to their legal expense. End of story. And so, that's a sort of interesting context, but it's, it's pretty top of mind right now. And I think people should probably pay more attention to it, to the point that like some people are kind of immune to like, oh, Europe's doing something crazy. But, the US tends to follow in some ways, not in all ways. So I think it's pretty important.
Well, this seems to be big enough. And back to your question, like what's going on with consumer and subscription, like, or just what are the drivers here? I mean, I think that's one of them. Europe is a big enough market that this does matter to entrepreneurs thinking about building different business models, right? And broadly, there's like three different, I guess I think of it in three different buckets. There's the consumer, social, and I guess media bucket that largely has been built on advertising. And you build a big audience, you monetize it using advertising, the marketing. You're building a huge marketing business for people. Media has been slightly different than that, and then you also have games, right? Games is this really interesting universe where you've got very large audiences. Some of them are huge subscription businesses. They also have enormous digital goods businesses in games. And there's been this thesis for now, I would say, over 15 years. I remember in the 05 to 2010 era at Facebook, we hired an economist from Stanford that like sat next to me in the pod, in one of my pods I sat in, that was just purely looking at Tencent's digital goods business model and whether or not we could do this. So this has been something we've been talking about forever. I think the other thing at play is consumer preferences are shifting quite a bit. I think people are used to
fragmenting.
Yeah, they're fragmenting, and their preferences are shifting a lot, right? I think people's willingness to subscribe to things, thanks to the App Store, thanks to Android, thanks to all of the fintech innovations of the last 10 years, has just made it a lot easier to click a button and subscribe to something, whether it's a Substack.
You can subscribe to a Forex trading platform.
Exactly.
And somehow make money.
And so the raw ingredients to build these things are different now. Now, whether or not you can build a huge business, I think is a really interesting question. And back to what I was kind of saying earlier, Netflix, 220 million subscribers, Amazon Prime, 200 million, Disney Plus, 130 million. All of the top, and I guess Spotify, 182 million. At least these are numbers that I was able to pull in the last couple of days. Like these are huge content libraries with enormous amounts of, very serious business deals and IP rights. And to build the same kind of a subscription business using consumer social techniques is very difficult.
I want to hear from Brett.
Well, I was just going to ask, in light of even those statistics, Dave, like, is there a ceiling that like digital subscriptions tap out at, right? Like, so it feels like outside of the iClouds and Apples and Googles and all of those products, like the 200 to 300 million subscriber mark is kind of like the average cap of a lot of these pretty large companies like Spotify and Disney Plus and Netflix, et cetera. And so like, where do they go from there? In order to grow their business, will they just have to like keep raising prices or produce new outputs? And like, what are the other impacts of that?
And you have these like bundling problems too, right? Where at some point with pricing and subscriptions, you end up in this situation where consumers get really frustrated. They don't want to subscribe to 10 things for $10. Suddenly you're paying $100 a month. And so the businesses have to, think about how to bundle. And this was like a huge part of cable and how things played out.
Before we run to cable, I want to say one or two. Just here's the thing. I think I want to propose an alternative future because I think it's the one we're actually going towards, which is it's just going to be a shitload of smaller, very profitable niche apps, right? Like no one is, first of all, subscription, the biggest problem with subscription, it's a math problem, which is the bigger your base is, if you have the flat churn rate, no matter what that is, the bigger the base is, it's harder and harder to make up your churn the bigger you get. It's just a math problem. You have to acquire more and more subscribers to stay flat as your denominator grows.
Yep.
And like that's just how it works. So these things do naturally tap out at a certain scale. That scale can be big, but it cannot be, I mean, the biggest subscription services are a tenth the size of the biggest internet services for a reason. And there is that subscription line.
And then I'm looking it up, and it's actually the biggest gaming services are a tenth the size of the biggest subscription services.
So that's part one. Part two, consumer preferences are fracturing, and because all of a sudden it used to be ads was the easy model to drop in, right? You had something, you had some users, you drop in a fucking pixel, you call it a day. To Dave's point, Stripe, Apple, like a bunch of these players have made subscriptions far more turnkey for apps. And so I do think that the very obvious subscale business strategy is going to be subscriptions to your core versus being ads. So there are apps then you get to, like I'll give you one that we all use and is early, which is like Retro, right? Like I love Retro. Retro's a great little app. Is Retro going to compete with Facebook? Of course it is.
For 9 VCs, yes. But that you're looking at
but I like it. I use it. I'll keep using it. And eventually I think they'll charge me for it. I don't think that's a VC traditional backscale business. Like it's hard to imagine that being $1 billion company any way you slice it. It's super easy to imagine that company making $50 million a year, right? And like being a really great business to own. And so this goes back to my whole like where is VC going thing, when where is seed investing going, which is I expect a future with lots more apps that we would consider quote unquote subscale, but still are great apps that lots of people use and are great fucking businesses, but aren't necessarily global platforms. There'll be more of them. They'll be monetized through subscription. They'll have their niches. And I think frankly, it depends what conversation you want to have, but like this conversation of what's the next 200 million person subscriber app, the answer is there isn't one, right? But there is going to be a bajillion smaller apps, which are great businesses that if you finance correctly with the right capital efficiency, are awesome businesses to own and operate and grow. Maybe you end up combining them and like bundling them as companies. But it's just a very different future, and I think it has a lot to do with this monetization pattern changing.
So do you think, Sam, that there is like that we have more IIC models in 5 to 10 years?
This has been my thing. I've been like shooting my mouth off all over the internet on this, but this is my jam, Britt. Is like I'm like, you know what we can do? You know what slow ventures can do?
What?
You know what
Tell me.
You guys can do?
What?
I'm an LP. Here's what we do.
Okay.
Stop fucking financing companies with the expectation they're going to be billion user platforms.
This is part of our pitch, by the way. Like in the
instead, finance a bunch of companies that are capital efficient that we can put a few $1 million into, build 6 subscription businesses off of at the $50-100 million scale. As seed investors, we love that. We make plenty of fucking money on those, especially if we start bundling them up. We sell them to collectors, whatever. Who gets fucked is the industrial venture capital complex.
Industrial venture.
Oh, I hate the industrial venture capital complex. But it's the people who have to jam money into things and need gajillion-dollar outcomes to have good investing businesses, right?
How do you make money? Those things are ultimately sold. You sell.
They can be sold. You can sell. Someone's going to start the roll-up strategy, the IACs of them. You sell it into a public vehicle.
If you're putting a few $1 million into these things and they're doing 50 million in ARR, you're loving it.
Why do they have to sell or give you your money? I mean,
you don't.
Well, you want to exit as the investor would like cash back.
That's industrial thinking, Britt. I mean, I agree that is, but like the reality is, you got to.
What, you want dividends?
Maybe
50 million. Look, LPs hate dividends. We know that, but you know what? If you get a bunch of companies that are doing 50 million in free cash flow, and you own 10% of them, and you put in $2.5 million to help get them started, I promise you that at a certain point, LPs are like, oh yeah, we'll take those fucking checks, right? Like that's pretty good, right? And I think that, we got to use, as the real seed investors in the world, right? We have to use our leverage point, right? And what we can do differently to win. And I think that people who are betting on these questions of what's going to be the next 200 million subscriber, they're asking the wrong question, right? Like there's going to be plenty of $1 $500 million companies born that are going to be more vertical. They're going to have loyal subscriber bases, low churn rates, great, easy to operate, capital efficient.
Teams are happier.
One of these businesses, right?
That's why we're talking up your game, Jess.
Jess, where do you think where do you think I got this idea? It's
and
like
Britain Co's, by the way, to be clear, like just like tens of millions of dollars in revenue, profitable. That's the jam.
Cranking it. And by the way, from my personal experience in my family and people around, you know who lives great lives? It's the entrepreneurs who own the vast majority of their businesses, control their destinies, make tens of millions of dollars a year top line doing what they love, right? And the only people that are mad are the venture capitalists who put money in too late, expecting
or who didn't invest.
But
to be clear, it's really hard, Sam.
Yeah, he's making it sound like a walk in the park, Jess. Well, the best thing, the easiest thing to do is just to do a 50 million ARR company.
It's better to have 10 million true subscribers than 1 billion users.
Yeah, but you still have to manage churn and everything else. So,
of course, this is not rocket science. I just look in my own backyard, literally. I'm like, oh, more of those, please. And the good part about being an investor is I don't have to do the hard work.
Yeah, I just go up with matching. You're pattern matching. Sam, you remember when you wrote columns in the information that I edited, and now you just write screenshots? But you wrote a column called, and this one was good because our professional editors edited it, called "Fire Your Customers." You should fire more customers.
That was like almost 10 years ago I wrote that.
Yeah, well, this conversation reminds me of that, right? Which is like, not all revenue is building enterprise value. Not all customers are kind of worth it. Rethinking, what does success look like for, a super impactful consumer business? And then also from the investor side. So I think that's why this moment is it's like destabilizing, but fun in the industry. So, I want to end by talking a little bit about what's happening in boring traditional media land, because it is related. And Dave, you were talking about the kind of bundling of apps and just sort of the economics of too many subscriptions. So we've been following ESPN here, and we've seen a kind of really big escalation in the cable wars, with Charter, controlled by John Malone, saying, actually, ESPN, you're asking for too much money for our cable subscribers to get you. And so we're just going to go dark, and we are going to basically take you out of this bundle that Charter, I believe, subscribers are going to get. And, it's the kind of thing that you see now and again in cable every couple of years, these sort of carriage wars over carriage fees. But a lot of people I talk to, and including our very experienced reporters and editors, say this one is like totally different. They're sticking it to ESPN when they're weak. And that John Malone, who most of the listeners of this pod will not have read Cable Cowboy, but they should, about the history of the
or The
industry.
Outsiders, which is one of the greatest business books of all time.
Or the Offer, which has absolutely nothing to do with it. It was a great TV show.
Actually, it does. Sam, it kind of does, because we can end with The Godfather if we must. But it does kind of seem like we're at this moment where and who knows, maybe these guys will find that price and ESPN will get carried. But in the absence of that, we're really seeing, I think, the beginning, an acceleration of the unraveling of the bundle. Obviously, like the direct and over the top model has been doing this, but like this is kind of a big deal with these two sort of titans saying, hey, we're not going to do business together. I don't know. Britt, what do you think? You know Disney.
Oh my God. Well, again, back to my Google TV days of 09 and 10 and 11. Like this has all just been writing on the wall. And, actually, it's interesting. I think YouTube TV is going to be the real winner in the long run, because what gets unbundled gets rebundled, and we just all want it bundled back right now into a single subscription. Like now I have 50 different apps on my Apple TV, and like I have to go into each one, and I just want the lineup again, but app by app. And like, I actually think that's going to be the best user experience down the line. But yeah, this is just writing on the wall. I think what's interesting is there are still 75 million cable subscribers in the US, and Charter owns about 20 million of those. And so it's a pretty significant amount of the current cable subscriptions in the US, and they're all just blacked out right now. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but the subscribers are actually complaining so much that they've lost all these channels, and like the US Open is happening, all that, and they're missing out. And so Charter is actually paying quietly $15 for these subscribers and giving them like rebates and refunds back on their monthly subscription, which is also costing them a shitload of money right now.
But I do think this is like, look, in the end of the day, these cable businesses, it's like if you haven't already canceled cable, you're not going to cancel cable, right? And so like I actually think this is exactly right, which is just like any like AOL or these things. It's like everyone has already shifted who was going to shift, and the people remaining, like I actually bet you could have almost no content and they will still just pay for cable because it's like stuck on their bills and whatever else. So I think that's kind of the part of the game we're now in, is like these subscription businesses, like they just never go away. It's kind of like old cryptocurrencies that like people just like keep mining forever, even though
I think there's one more. I think there's a big one, at least one or two more drop offs. I don't think we're at like the AOL.
How big were they at their peak? I mean, this kind of gives us some numbers around like what like if 75 million is sort of your persistently subscribed base, right? Like that kind of gives you a sense. And like
I want to see the chart. I bet it's just asymptoting out.
Yeah.
And I bet it's like it's a very simple math. So if it's asymptoting out, it's like forget the user experience. Sure, you pay someone $15 to make them go away because it's cheaper than keeping them on the customer service line. Like that is the actual math. It's like talking to them for an hour about how mad they are. It's just cheaper to give them $15 and make them go away. Is like if it's just asymptoted, it's asymptoted. And like that actually at that point, your strategy is use it as a cash cow, make the cost as low as you possibly can, and just make cash forever and send it to your shareholders.
Yeah, which is why they don't care.
Too? Don't we have the triple, quadruple, quintuple, bundle or something? VoIP, throw some VoIP in there. Isn't that the...
I mean, isn't this being driven by the same thing that we were talking about earlier, which is that these big companies, Disney Plus wants to go direct to consumer, have their own subscription relationship. Like everybody wants to have a direct subscriber relationship. They don't want to be bundled.
Well, they want their cake and eat it too, right? So yeah, I mean, that's totally part of it, because the cable guys are like, okay, if you're going to do that, why are we, that certainly changes like their negotiating leverage if they're going direct. But I think like Disney is still banking on those carriage fees to whether.
Yeah.
Or are they just looking for the lowest cost? Aren't they just looking for the lowest cost per customer, like per cable subscriber?
Well, I will say, but remember, Dave, the carriage thing was one of the greatest scams of all time because they got paid whether or not you used it.
Yeah.
Right. So like the reality is like that was free money for Disney that just doesn't persist once these cable bundlers like, candidly, we're asymptoted out. We're going to take our cash, go acquire your own goddamn customers. Right. Like, and they actually have to care about the content as opposed to being like, you just get ESPN. Right. Like, and you're paying for it, even not watching it. So I do think the people who are banking on free money, those days, like when things get tight, those days go away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, were built on the back of John Malone acquiring the lowest cost. He made this business on acquiring the lowest cost subscribers in the country, like regional market by regional market. And that's where the cable bundles or the cable subscription empires were built. Right. Yeah.
Fun fact, only interview I've ever gotten after faxing a letter to someone to request an interview. This is how John Malone likes to get his interview requests. Got me the interview.
Guys, I was looking into this because Jess can agree with this. Is like I'm obsessed with the fact that I can email my printer and it will print for me.
This came up. I was waiting for it, guys. The big technology revelation in the Lesson household this week. It was not the sauna now working with the iPhone app, because I don't think that happens yet. But we have a printer. We had a cocktail party for our preschool. A coffee party, and Sam showed the parents our printer on the floor of our coat closet. And I'm so damn embarrassed because here we are supposed to be the technology whippet people. And they thought he was going to unveil like a 3D something. And they're like, it's an HP.
I love this thing. I'm back to paper. And so I was looking into like, can I get a fax machine? Because I would love it if I had a fax number up and I said, hey, if you want to pitch me, fax me. I actually think those pitches would be pretty high quality.
I agree.
Right?
And they can drop pictures.
As opposed to email. You can't, like
drop pictures.
I mean, we get back to the fax bombing days.
Yeah,
where you
yeah.
put the black
Oh,
paper
dear
and you
God.
roll it and just
Well,
flip.
I think it should be. I was talking to Dave about this last night because our 8-year-old is taking like a typing course, and like Dave and I were telling him about the computer lab when we were in school and how you would print out the things you would type in the computer lab with the paper that had like the holes on the edges, and then it would rip off the edges and fold them, but you can make them into
You
things.
can make banners.
Yeah, and I think we
Remember
should get that
banners?
kind of paper too with our new fax machine so that we
The
can
laser
actually play with
writer.
the paper.
The laser writer. Oh my God, this is great.
Image writer. Wasn't it like
You're
that?
right.
That's the laser writer.
The laser writer was
image.
after it was the image writer. You're absolutely
It was
right.
the image writer.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
my
all of
God.
this was inspired by that I got this new teenage engineering loudspeaker called the Magic Radio, which is, I think, one of the most unbelievably interesting products on earth right now. Like it's like a Bluetooth speaker, but it records on a hard drive everything you're listening to, and then you can like scratch it and remix it and loop it, and it's like the funnest toy to play with your kids. But it combines like old and new in a way that I haven't seen before.
Guys, we need affiliate codes for this shit. Yeah, we should get in kickbacks on this.
We should have a counter.
Printers to shoes to Dave's cool thing that sounds actually interesting.
Speaking of which, are we gonna announce our more or less cocktail party?
Oh gosh, Sam, what do we have to announce? What are you going rogue here?
Remember, it's like if you write a review since we don't make any money on this, we want to find ways to lose more money. So we're like, we're gonna do if you write us a review, then you can come over and I'll cook you hamburgers
At the pool house.
Sounds
At the
good.
pool house.
But like,
Wow.
what do they have to do? Screenshot the review and send
Well,
it
it
to
has
you?
to be a good review, a positive
fax it to
review.
me. They
Yeah.
need to fax me the review.
Okay, I think we're still working out the kinks, but
There's something in there.
but basically we are looking for ways to bring more IRL to the more or less community and to all our awesome listeners out there. We are grateful. We are grateful for the feedback. So we are plotting ways to gather. And one idea we've been floated is inviting those of you who give us glowing 5-star reviews.
Yeah. We don't take less than 5 stars.
What could be cooler?
Yeah, who wouldn't want? You know what we can do, guys? We can do like what big podcasters do. We can do a live episode
Big
where we like record it at the pool
Is
house.
this like the industrial
barbecue?
podcast, like industrial venture capital?
industrial
We're
podcasting.
We're artisanal podcasting.
Big podcast, man. You gotta we gotta screw up big podcasts. They're out of control.
Yeah. I would say stay tuned on this. We're the fall, the ideas are flowing, the community is hopping. This has been great. I think maybe we can wrap this episode because we've actually surprisingly covered a lot of ground. And
Wait, what about Sam and Britt's TV corner?
Well, mine's not TV. Mine's TS. So
Okay, give us a little Tay and a little.
I'm going to give
TV
you my
to end it.
60-second update on
Yeah.
Taylor Swift and why she's still a genius. However, she should pivot to subscriptions based on this episode, and even if she caps out at 50 million. Okay, so
Yeah,
Taylor,
I will build her a subscription social network just for her fans.
we've probably all seen that she's.
So many people have tried this, Dave. This is bringing.
Yeah,
back
but it
so many
wasn't
people.
us, Jess. Like, if we can do
And
this.
it wasn't Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
We're going to pitch
It
Taylor
wasn't.
on the subscription. Okay. A lot of people have seen she launched her concert as a movie now. You can go into like AMC and Regal and all these different movie theaters. Not only did she like sell out the theaters,
Yeah, it was
gross
the single largest
biggest
first day
day
ever.
at AMC and
Wait,
Regal
this
and all these
happened
other.
already?
So first of all, she's bringing back movie theaters because she's like biggest opening sales day ever.
Yeah, they did 26 or 27 million in pre-orders first day.
Guys, but AMC is down 36%.
Okay,
We
keep
all know,
going.
Sam, that stock isn't impacted immediately by the Barbie movie and Taylor and all these things, remember? Okay.
But-
she geniusly also made the adults ticket price $19.89 and the kids ticket price $13.13, which is her favorite number. 1989 is her album. But also her family and herself negotiated directly with AMC's CEO and said, everyone else was trying to get this deal for me, including Netflix and whatever. But they paid for the concert themselves between $10 and $20 million.
Production.
And they negotiated directly with all of the movie theaters to get like a 50-50 split. of the ticket prices, which in net is going to give them like so much more money than the streaming services. But then even after 13 weeks of being in the theater, they're going to bring it to streaming. So all in all, I just think it's a clever
business.
That's why
AMC stock is down because they just gave half their money to Taylor Swift.
But their brand vibe is up, Sam.
But to be clear, they went around the distributors. Like that's kind of part and parcel to what we're talking about. Like, here's a content owner that just went direct to the fans, right?
Why wouldn't Taylor Swift have been like, look, grant me a third of the company? Like,
I don't think you want a third of AMC, Sam.
Why not?
You just looked at the stock price.
Well, it's only a $1.3 billion market cap company.
But I think it's not just their theaters. I agree, Britt. It's totally amazing. I think, as always, the question just is like, is she just too much of an outlier for this to be any broader commentary on the state of distribution?
I don't know. I think if artists record their concerts and go to theaters, I think that would actually be a huge thing. Most people can't afford. People can't afford to go to a lot of these concerts now. They're far away.
The opera invented this. Phantom events. Don't you remember that being advertised? Where they have the opera live in the movie theater, and you're like, why would I ever go to that?
Yeah, and I think it also just speaks to. Yeah, I think it speaks to this almost spiritual need that people have right now to have collective. We talked about this before, but to have this collective experience with other people, I think it's directly in this.
This is a good dividing line. The Morons are definitely more in-person collective experience, and the Lessons are definitely.
I'm more pool house.
Sam is more pool house in-person experiences.
Sam likes the one-on-one.
I love one-on-one. I can deal with 2-on-1. More than that, too many people.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave it here. Great to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Thanks to everyone who's listening, who's sharing, who's talking about it. We'll see you next time on More or Less.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.